Just wanted to say thank you to everyone for coming to the videos. Crossed over 2 million views since the event happened on the 19th, and that has everything to do with you and very little to do with me. I think most of us can say now clearly that this was something other than an accident, but those who have continued to come and detract have pushed me, and I do appreciate that. One gentleman, I don't recall his name at the moment, asked if physics proves that this couldn't have been an accident, where are all my calculations? Well, I've tried not to bore people to death. I've tried to keep the video short to 10 minutes and show, the video of the track and let people make decisions for themselves. So in this video, I'm going to attempt to show some different calculations that prove how this story we're being fed about an accident couldn't possibly be. Now we're going to start with the basic one, the speed. Okay, a knot is roughly 1.1 miles per hour. The track that we're being shown from the vessel finding service shows prior to the accident the ACX crystal is translating at roughly between 18.1 and 18.4 knots, roughly 20 miles per hour. Now, you can also go to this thing called angular size calculator. Basically, if you know how far something is away and you know how big it is, that you can say how large it's going to appear in front of you. For example, I used the example 3 miles and 500 feet long. So this would be roughly, the 505 feet number is the complete aspect, perpendicular aspect of the Fitzgerald. At 3 miles would have only appeared to be 1.82 degrees visually, which is a speck. There's a very it's hard to quantify that, but if you were on the bridge of a vessel like the ACX Crystal 100 feet above the water, even during the day, something that is only 1.8 degrees, covering 1.8 degrees in front of you, is very, very tiny. Also, I went to this, and I've been here before, the United States Power Squadrons, where they talk about some basics when dealing with large ships, and I glossed over this, but I think it's kind of important here. Point 4, although these ships have radar, perhaps more than one, the beam angle comes off from so high up, sometimes 100 feet or more, that you may not be seen. Generally speaking, if you are less than 3 miles ahead of a big ship, you are invisible to her radar. The beam has probably gone right over you. Okay, well, there's no evidence that the ACX Crystal has a bow-mounted radar, so we're going to have to go with this, that within 3 miles at night, it is highly unlikely that the crystal could have visually determined the location and bearing of the Fitz. Now, you can also, another place you can go, someone else had mentioned that my channel is as entertaining as the Flat Earth people, which is a bit humbling because those guys are really entertaining. But you can go to this distance to horizon calculator. This will tell you that based on how high you are above the surface of the Earth, how far away the maximum visual distance is of the horizon. I used in this case 100 feet, height of the observation deck of the crystal, roughly. So roughly 12 miles would have been their maximum visual distance under ideal circumstances. So, knowing the speeds, and I'm sorry for boring people with all of that dry stuff, but it was asked for, and I'm going to show how that applies when you watch this track. Okay, now this is 1 o'clock in the morning, ACX Crystal, transiting at 18 knots. And we're going to play this forward, and at 18 knots, 20 miles per hour, you are roughly transiting 1 mile every 3 minutes. And anybody who's been on a road trip has done this. 60 miles an hour is a mile a minute. 20 miles an hour is a mile every 3 minutes. So, we're at 110. And coming up at 115. Okay, so 15 minutes of travel. The reason I stop here is because what this represents, 15 minutes of travel at 20 miles per hour, is roughly 5 miles of travel. Now, the captain stated that at 120, he steered hard right to avoid a collision that occurred 10 minutes later. Now, we've covered that at this point, 5 minutes from now, he actually turns left, not right. Or I should say port, not starboard. But he would have been, now this is 15 minutes away from the collision time. He's 5 miles away. Now remember our angular size calculator. Okay, he could have been at this point still technically having the fits on his radar, because they said within 3 miles he would have been invisible. So he would have been still on his radar, but visually at night, absolutely not. There's no way he could have possibly had a visual, even if the fits was presenting him a complete perpendicular aspect of 500 feet. It would have been way too tiny at night on the horizon to see. And also, this other ship up here is transiting literally perpendicular, or excuse me, parallel to the crystal. So they would have roughly had the same bearing on the fits as they did. They're not very far apart here. But we're going to play this forward. Okay. Now remember, 18 knots. There's our turn at 120. This is when he said he made the turn to avoid. He said he made a turn to starboard to avoid the fits. And here we show him making this turn to port. Okay, now I'm going to stop here. We are now 5 minutes away from the collision. At this point, there's no way in the world he would have had him on radar. There would have been no way he could have had a visual on him because of the distance and it being at night. And this ship here would have had the exact same issue. And it would have had to have made some kind of adjustment, because what's being alleged is that the fits came in at an angle like this on a collision course. Even if it was coming like this, this ship here would have probably had the exact same problem. And we don't hear anything about the, what is that, the one high 266 reporting anything like this. So here we go forward. And of course, everybody's familiar now at this point with the strangeness that occurs here. And the whole purpose of this video today was just to illustrate the distances and the times and the ability of the crystal to have either visual contact or radar contact. And the last question we're going to ask here is, if the ship is unable to see something in front of it with its radar less than 3 miles away, how in the world did they find this thing on the return trip? Because they went a half an hour down the road and it was only at 14 knots, but that's still 7 miles. They went 7 miles out, so they turned back around. I guess they could have gotten back on radar, but once they got within 3 miles, how would they have known? And another thing, and we're going to go ahead and jump to that point, they said that at 2:25, and this is from the Japanese Coast Guard, they received, yeah, this is right, 2:22, 2:23, 2:24. Okay, now from the Japanese Coast Guard, this is the time of the phone call. Way back off the screen over here is the time of the collision, is the location for the collision. The crystal doesn't get anywhere near that area and we'll say it's about right here until 11 minutes later. They were miles away. So this pretty much puts the nail on that. And the last thing we're going to say, people have come to the channel and said, why are you continuing? What are you hoping to achieve? What I'm hoping to achieve is maintaining this fresh in everyone's mind. These details, these numbers, so that when the Navy comes out in 3 months, when they said they're going to with their ultimate findings on this, and they talk about how this was an unfortunate accident and how they're going to change training procedures, and they have really appreciated the cooperation with the Japanese and Philippine authorities, that they have shared all of their information, and hopefully, you know, we won't have any events like this. And then they'll go about talking about how the sailors were heroes and all this kind of stuff. And most of America, most of the world, having moved on to other events, will have completely forgotten how great big of a lie this was. How this couldn't have occurred the way they said it did. And that's what they're banking on. They're banking on people moving on in the news cycle. And that's what their silence is hoping to achieve. But we're not going to let that happen here. We're going to go over this and over this and over this and over this again. And, honestly, if you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to watch. My videos are very easy to identify from their title and from the name of the person making the video. So, anyway, like, share, subscribe. Thank you very, very much. Surely appreciate it. And we will see you next time. Thank you.